Have you ever wondered why API documentation is so crucial and how it can be simplified? API documentation is the roadmap for any developer. It provides the necessary details about how to effectively use and integrate an API. But creating and maintaining this documentation can be a daunting task. It requires a consistent and standardized approach and often involves complex coding. This is where tools that automate and streamline the process come in handy. One such tool that has gained immense popularity is Swagger. So, what exactly is Swagger, you might ask? Well, Swagger is a widely recognized tool known for its prowess in API documentation. It's like a Swiss Army knife for developers, offering a multitude of handy features. At its core, Swagger allows developers to describe their APIs using a standardized format, the OpenAPI specification. This means you can detail out everything from available endpoints to authentication requirements. And the magic doesn't stop there. Once your API is described, Swagger goes to work, automatically generating comprehensive documentation. But it's not just about static documentation. Swagger takes it up a notch by providing interactive API documentation. It's like a playground for developers where they can explore, experiment, and see real-time responses without writing a single line of code. Moreover, Swagger helps ensure consistency across APIs, simplifies SDK generation, and even supports versioning for efficient change management. Now that we have a basic understanding of what Swagger is, let's delve deeper into its features. Swagger comes packed with a host of features that make API documentation a breeze. Let's break it down. Firstly, Swagger automates the documentation generation process. It allows developers to describe their API using the OpenAPI specification, a standard format that includes all the nitty-gritty details like endpoints, supported HTTP methods, request-response formats, and authentication requirements. Once the API is described, Swagger does the heavy lifting and generates comprehensive documentation. Next up, Swagger brings interactivity to API documentation. It presents the documentation as a web interface where developers can explore the API, try out different requests, and see the responses in real time. This hands-on approach helps developers understand the API's workings without the need to write any code up front. Thirdly, Swagger ensures consistency and standardization. By using Swagger, developers can maintain a uniform approach to API documentation across their organization, or even across different organizations that use the OpenAPI specification. This standardization simplifies the process of understanding and integrating with APIs as developers get accustomed to the Swagger format and layout. Moving on, Swagger can generate client SDKs for various programming languages based on the API documentation. These SDKs provide pre-built functions and classes that simplify making HTTP requests and handling responses. This feature speeds up the development process for clients consuming the API, enabling them to integrate the SDK into their codebase and start using the API without having to write boilerplate code. Additionally, Swagger can generate server stubs for implementing the API in various programming languages and frameworks. These stubs provide a foundation for building the back-end logic of the API, including routing requests to the correct handlers and validating input/output data according to the API specification. Lastly, Swagger supports versioning of API documentation. This allows developers to document different versions of their API and track changes over time, which is crucial for managing backward compatibility, communicating changes to API consumers, and ensuring smooth transitions between different API versions. As we can see, Swagger offers many benefits that simplify API documentation. So, why do developers choose Swagger for their API documentation needs? Well, the reasons are manifold. Let's recap. Swagger is an immensely popular tool for API documentation, and it's not hard to see why. First, it automates documentation generation. Developers outline their API in a standard format called OpenAPI specification, detailing endpoints, supported HTTP methods, request and response formats, and more. Swagger then takes this and creates comprehensive documentation, saving developers valuable time. Second, Swagger's interactive API documentation is a game changer. It presents a web interface where developers can explore the API, experiment with requests, and observe responses in real time. This hands-on experience is invaluable for understanding the API without writing a single line of code. Third, Swagger brings consistency and standardization to API documentation. Across different APIs or organizations, the Swagger format is a familiar face. This standardization simplifies the process of integrating with APIs. Fourth, Swagger generates client SDKs based on the API documentation. These SDKs provide ready-made functions, abstracting away the complexities of HTTP requests and responses. This speeds up the development process for clients using the API. Fifth, Swagger also generates server stubs for implementing the API, providing a solid foundation for building back-end logic. Lastly, Swagger supports versioning, crucial for managing backward compatibility, communicating changes, and ensuring smooth transitions between API versions. In conclusion, Swagger is a powerful tool that can greatly simplify the process of API documentation, making it an excellent choice for developers.